Well, hey everybody, welcome to another week of our series, The You Effect. We're talking all about the change that you have as a high school, as a middle school, or even as a college student in the world around you. This week we're talking a little bit more specifically to those of us who follow Jesus. However, if you're like, I'm still on the fence about the God thing, the Jesus thing, I'm not sure where I land, I think you'll still gain something really crucial out of this message. But we've been talking throughout this series about what it means to have effect on people, what it means to have change, and what effect we as individuals have on the world around us. Because as we've been talking about, you have effect on the people around you. Whether you like it or not, whether you mean to or not, you're affecting people. Your attitude, your behavior, all of it affects the people around you. And so if you want to have a positive effect, if you want to do what God has called us to, if you want to make the world a better place, if you want to see issues get changed, and if you want to make a lasting impression on others and on the world, there's a couple of different things that we have to do. We've been talking about some of those things throughout this series, but today we're talking specifically about how we're supposed to act in order to effect change. Like, what are we supposed to do to make this happen? Because sometimes we have these ideas of like, all right, I want to affect change, or I realize that the way that I'm affecting people is negative, or maybe not as positive as I'd like it to be, but I don't really know how I'm supposed to act. I don't know any other way of acting or how to be different. And this is going to be the big idea for the day, so I'm going to throw it at you early, but if you forget everything else, please hear this one thing. And it's the way you act determines your impact. The way that you act, the way you carry yourself, the way that you behave, the way that you show yourself to other people will determine your impact on the world. Because sometimes we can have a negative effect on those around us, but if we want to have a positive effect, how are we supposed to act? How are we supposed to be? And of course, Jesus provides some insight into this. This is going to be a little bit of a weird analogy, so you're going to have to bear with me here a little bit, but as we play this out, I think it'll give us some crucial insights into how we're supposed to carry ourselves and act, especially as followers of Jesus, in order to effect change in the world around us. So here's what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5. He says in verse 13, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." Wow, really encouraging stuff there. No one really puts that verse up on their bumper sticker or on their Instagram or something like that, but there's a lot of good information in that verse. You see, we hear that and we think, you're the salt of the earth. What exactly is Jesus talking about there? Like, we're supposed to go on waffle fries? I don't even understand. But what Jesus means is that we are meant to help provide a little bit of flavor to the world around us. And I know that this is going to lose a little bit of context because salt for us is something that we actually maybe try to stay away from because maybe our blood pressure is too high if you're old and you think about those things like I do, or maybe you just hear the term salt and all you can think of is being salty. But that's not what Jesus is talking about here. You see, back in that day, before they had refrigerators and chests of ice and things like that to keep meat preserved in cold, what they would use is they would instead salt the meat, and that way it protected its flavor and its freshness, and it allowed the meat to extend and go further. You know, it provided further life to that piece of food. On top of that, it also provided flavor to that food. Have you ever eaten something that was a little bit under-flavored, and you're eating it and you're like, nice gazpacho soup, Mom? Not so much, because it doesn't have any flavor. It's not enjoyable to eat food with no flavor. You see, what Jesus is telling us is that the way that we act should have the same effect on other people that salt does to food. We should be life-giving to other people in the way that we act. We should help allow them to enjoy their life, enjoy what they're doing more, because we're just like salt in that way. The same way salt extends the shelf life of food and allows for the food to be more enjoyable, that's the effect that you should have on other people. And I think a really good challenge for us is that the impact I'm having? Is that the effect I have? Do people feel more life when they're done hanging out with me? Or do they feel worse? Do they feel more joy? Or do they feel lower in their self-esteem? You see, Jesus calls us as Christians, we don't have a choice. And if you're not, this is just a good way to live, but are you providing life to people and are you providing joy to people? Because the way that you act should do those two things. And if you're doing something, if you're acting in a way that takes away life or takes away joy, you should probably change the way that you act. Because that's not what Jesus calls us to. He actually says that salt, when it doesn't provide flavor, when it loses that saltiness, is just thrown to the ground and walked on. The same way we use salt to just throw on roads and melt ice. You see, if we're people who don't actually do what we're intended to do, we're not fulfilling our purpose. Our effect, our change, is basically nothing. Jesus goes on in verse 14 to say, "You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house." You see, Jesus follows up his salt comment and says, not only are you salt, but you're meant to be light as well. And again, think about the context for this. Think about like medieval times, or think about before modern electricity. If the sun wasn't up, it was dark out. They didn't have flashlights on their phone. They didn't have skylights, things like that. So Jesus is saying you are to represent light to the world. The same way that a city glows at nighttime. If you've ever ridden in a plane, or maybe you've driven in from the country and you can kind of see the glow of all the lights of the city. He said the same way that a city glows, your life should shine that way as well. And just like no one would ever light a candle and then put it under a basket or put it under a bucket or something, no one would ever hide the candle. When you light a candle, you let it shine. You put it on a stand so that people can see it, because that light helps you find your way in the darkness. And Jesus says, that's how you should behave. Not behave as much as that's how you should act. Your life should represent light to other people. Like when people look at you, when they talk about you, not only should they say, yeah, they kind of give me some life and some joy the same way that salt does, they should say that they help me find my way in the darkness. Because truth of the matter is we're living in some dark times. Things are scary, things are uncertain. There's lots of divide, lots of hate, and lots of things that, honestly, I don't think I ever thought I would see in my lifetime. And as a result, people have lost hope, and people are living in a little bit of darkness. You've seen this in your high school. You've seen this in your middle school. You know other people that are living in darkness. Maybe it's because of low self-esteem or low income or addiction. I'm not sure what it is, but we're supposed to live our lives in a way that help others navigate their way through that darkness. We're supposed to shine so that people notice us. The same way that it's noticeable when you're in a dark room and one of your friends is texting and you're like, dude, I'm trying to go to sleep. Get that stupid phone light out of my face. Or a movie theater, or when you see a city, when you're in an airplane. Light is noticeable, and you should be noticeable too for all of the right reasons. And this is the main reason out of all of them. This is what Jesus wraps up that verse with. He says, in the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. Jesus says, do these things, act in this way, so that the effect that you have on others points them right back to the Father, points them right back to who God is, points them right back to Jesus and what he's done for us. Because that's what brings hope. That's what brings peace. That's what brings a higher self-esteem. That's what brings light in darkness. That's what brings more joy, is when we live our lives in a way that the effect of the way we act points people back to who Jesus is. And as a high school, middle school student, that's really difficult to do. It's really difficult to live your life that way because not a lot of other people are. But imagine the effect that you would have on your school, on your sports team, on your family, if you lived your life in a way that was shining so bright that people couldn't help but take notice. Because the way you act is going to determine your impact. And Jesus tells us to act a certain way. He says, be light in the darkness. Shine for other people to see. Pretend you're like salt and bring people joy and bring flavor to life. So I would encourage you to look at your relationships and maybe even ask them, what's it like to be on the other side of me? Do you feel life? Do you feel better? Do you feel like you have hope? That you have a light in the darkness? Or do you feel worse? Do you feel confused? Do you feel judged? And honestly, let people answer that honestly to you. Because Jesus calls us to act in a certain way. As a high school, middle school student, acting like salt and light doesn't sound like the coolest thing in the world. However, you know people that when they're around, people are happier. they're more joyful. That's who God's calling you to be. So it might be a little corny, but what I want to ask you is, are you being salt or are you just acting salty? Like, are you bringing your friend group some life and some joy, or do you constantly cut other people with your remarks, make fun of them for not having the same things that you do? And do you tear other people down so that you can look like the funny guy of the group or the funny girl? Are you acting as light? Are you shining? Are you being hope in the darkness? Or are you just being bright? You know what I mean by that? Like a light that's too bright is something that you like don't even want to look at anymore because it's just like, oh, this is hurting my eyes. And are you acting that way? Are you just trying to be as bright as possible, draw as much attention to you so that you look good? Or are you just trying to be like the person who knows everything and it's turning other people off? Or you're the person that has to have a comeback for everything, and as a result, you're not shining a light, you're just being bright. You're just like, wow, I'm right in people's faces like LED headlights at night. Because that's probably turning people away. But what Jesus calls us to is to be salt and to be light. And remember, the way that you act will determine your impact in the world around you. Thank you.